centuries before Rome built its empire, before the Greeks carved their myths into stone. A mysterious European superpower rose from the rugged mountains along the Adriatic coast. A civilization so fearsome, so influential, that ancient empires wrote about them with equal parts awe and terror. And yet today, most people have never heard their name. They were the Illyrians, Europe's vanished superpower. Stay with me, because by the end of this video, you'll see why their story was almost erased, and why their legacy still shapes European nations today. And hey, before we dive deep, hit like, tell me where in the world you're watching from, and subscribe if you love hidden history. Alright, let's uncover the forgotten giants of Europe. Imagine a map of Europe about 3,000 years ago. Greece is rising. Rome is still small. But across the sparkling Adriatic Sea lies a massive region of tribal kingdoms stretching from what is now Croatia, Bosnia, Montenegro, Albania, Kosovo, Slovenia, and parts of Serbia. This vast territory belonged to the Illyrians. Not a single kingdom at first, but a collection of powerful tribes, the Talantii, the Dardani, the Adriatic, the Rdi, and more. They didn't build giant stone monuments like Egypt. They didn't write extensive texts like the Greeks. What they did build was a reputation for warriors who could shatter armies, for kings and queens who commanded fleets that even Rome feared, and for a culture whose roots may reach far back into Europe's Bronze Age. Archaeology tells us that Illyrian culture began forming around 1000 BCE, but their ancestors may have lived in the Western Balkans for thousands of years. Iron, salt, timber, and control of coastal trade routes made their lands valuable. But even more valuable were the Illyrians themselves. To the Greeks, they were unpredictable. To the early Romans, they were dangerous. To their neighbors, they were a force you negotiated with or avoided. This was no small tribal society. This was an emerging European power bloc. How the Illyrians became a power. Let's talk about why the Illyrians rose in the first place. 1. Geography made them survivors. The Illyrian homeland was a fortress built by nature. Mountain ranges, deep river valleys, and dense forests shaped a people who were tough, independent, and skilled at guerrilla-style warfare long before the word even existed. If Rome was a spear, the Illyrians were a stone hammer, raw, powerful, and impossible to ignore. 2. Ironworking and early technology. The Illyrians controlled rich iron deposits and quickly became masters of metalworking. Their weapons, curved swords, double axes, and heavy spears, were distinct and feared. Their armor design influenced later European styles. 3. Trade networks. Illyrians weren't just warriors. They were traders. Their territory connected Central Europe to the Mediterranean. Amber from the north, Greek wine from the south, metals from inland Europe, everything passed through Illyrian lands. With every trade caravan and merchant ship, Illyrian wealth grew. 4. Maritime power. And then came the ships. The Illyrians created lightning-fast warships, the lembi. These vessels were so swift that even seasoned Greek sailors struggled to defend against them. These ships allowed Illyrian rulers to dominate the Adriatic and tax or attack any vessel they wanted. For the first time, Illyria was rising from a collection of tribes to an international force. 5. Emergence of Illyrian kingdoms. By the 5th and 4th centuries BCE, true Illyrian kingdoms began forming. Kings like Bardylis built alliances, conquered neighbors, and defeated Macedonian armies. Yes, the same Macedon that would later produce Alexander the Great. At one point, Bardylis defeated Macedonia so badly that the kingdom nearly collapsed. If history had taken a slightly different turn, Europe might speak of Illyrian emperors instead of Macedonian ones. By now, Illyria was not just a regional power. It was becoming a superpower in the making. Let's enter the period that historians often call the closest thing to an Illyrian Golden Age. This era is filled with strong rulers, unique innovations, and one of the most iconic warrior queens in European history. 1. Bardylis the Great. Our story continues with Bardylis, often considered the greatest Illyrian ruler. He brought organization, military reform, and diplomatic strategy to the Illyrians. He ruled for nearly 90 years, an astonishing lifespan for the ancient world. Under Bardylis, Illyria expanded deep into Macedonia. Trade flourished. Metallurgy reached its peak. Alliances stretched across the Balkans. Some historians say Bardylis built the first truly unified Illyrian political entity. 2. Daily life and culture. So what were the Illyrians actually like? They lived in fortified hill settlements called gradinas. They practiced elaborate burial rituals, burial mounds filled with weapons, jewelry, helmets, and drinking cups. Illyrian women often held high status, and some tribes were matrilineal. They decorated metalwork with spirals, waves, and geometric symbols that still appear in Balkan art today. Music, dancing, warrior rituals, horsemanship, these were core parts of their identity. 3. Trade and diplomacy. Illyrians traded with Greeks, Thracians, Celts, and Italic peoples. They adopted some Greek pottery styles, but not Greek politics or religion. Illyrians held onto their own gods, Bindus, Medorus, Andenia, and more, deities tied to mountains, storms, and the sea. They were a culture deeply connected to nature's power. 4. The rise of Queen Teuta, Europe's forgotten warrior queen. Now, here comes one of the most fascinating figures in Illyrian history, Queen Teuta of the RDI. In the 3rd century BCE, Teuta inherited a kingdom with a strong navy and a warrior tradition, and she expanded it aggressively. Under her rule, Illyrian ships dominated the Adriatic. Greek city-states complained that Illyrian sailors were unstoppable. Merchants paid tribute, or paid the price. Queen Teuta wasn't just a symbol, she was a ruler who scared both Greece and Rome. In fact, she became so powerful that Rome declared war. Which brings us to the dramatic turning point of our story. By the time Queen Teuta ruled the RDI kingdom, Illyria had reached the height of its naval dominance. But something else was also rising across the Adriatic. A small republic with big ambitions, Rome. 1. Rome meets the Illyrians. At first, Rome didn't care much about Illyria. It was too focused on its wars with Carthage. But Illyria controlled the Adriatic Sea, the gateway for Roman trade with Greece. And Queen Teuta's warships had no problem stopping Roman merchants, taxing them, or even sinking their vessels. When Roman ambassadors sailed to Illyria to negotiate peace, Teuta reportedly told them something chilling. "It is not for me to forbid my subjects to enrich themselves at the expense of my enemies." To Rome, that wasn't diplomacy. That was a challenge. 2. The First Illyrian War. Rome responded swiftly. In 229 BCE, it sent a massive fleet, over 200 ships, across the Adriatic. Not to negotiate, to conquer. But this wasn't a simple one-sided fight. The Illyrians fought fiercely. Their ships were faster. Their warriors knew the coastline like the lines on their hands. Queen Teuta fortified city after city, refusing to bow. For a moment, it seemed Illyria might actually repel the Roman advance. But Rome had something Illyria lacked: endless manpower and political unity. 3. The turning point. The fall of Corcyra, a key island, broke Teuta's defensive line. Roman legions marched inland. Illyrian allies deserted, afraid of Rome's growing might. Eventually, Teuta was forced to surrender. Rome reduced her authority and installed a puppet ruler. But this was only the beginning. 4. Mystery and fragmentation. After Teuta, Illyria did not disappear. It fractured into several smaller kingdoms, each trying to resist Roman influence. But something strange happened. The harder Illyrians fought, the faster they seemed to vanish from written history. Why? Because nearly every ancient source we have about Illyrians was written by Greeks and Romans, their enemies. And enemies don't write flattering histories. This is the mystery at the heart of Illyria. How did a civilization feared for centuries leave behind so few written records? Was it cultural choice? Illiteracy? Lost manuscripts? Or deliberate suppression by the empires that conquered them? We may never know. But Rome's final war with Illyria would erase the last great Illyrian kingdom from the map. By the mid-2nd century BCE, one Illyrian kingdom still stood strong. The kingdom of the RDI, ruled by a young, ambitious king named Gentius. Gentius tried to revive Illyrian power, strengthening the navy, forging alliances, and reclaiming lost territory. For a brief moment, it worked. Illyria looked ready to stand against Rome once again. 1. The final war. But Rome was now the dominant force of the Mediterranean. Any threat, real or imagined, was dealt with swiftly. When Gentius allied with Macedonia, Rome declared the Third Illyrian War. The conflict lasted just 30 days. Not because the Illyrians were weak, but because Rome threw overwhelming force at them. 2. The cinematic end. Picture this. Illyrian cities burning along the coast. Warriors fighting from cliffsides and forests. Illyrian ships sinking under Roman fire. Families fleeing into the mountains. And King Gentius, once proud, once defiant, captured and paraded through the streets of Rome as a symbol. With that single moment, in 168 BCE, the last Illyrian kingdom was gone. Rome divided the territory. Tribal identities faded. Illyrian languages disappeared. And an entire civilization dissolved into the expanding Roman world. Europe lost one of its earliest superpowers, not with a grand final battle, but with a swift, brutal erasure. The hidden survival of the Illyrians. Here's the part most people never hear. Illyria vanished from the map, but not from history. 1. Modern nations with Illyrian roots. Many Balkan populations today trace cultural, genetic, or historical connections to the Illyrians. Most notably, Albanians are widely believed by scholars to be the closest descendants of ancient Illyrians. Their language contains echoes of Illyrian tongues. Their mountain culture, symbols, and traditions carry ancient threads. But Illyrian influence is also felt across Croatia, Bosnia and Herzegovina, Montenegro, Kosovo, Serbia, Slovenia. The names of rivers, mountains, towns, many come from Illyrian words. 2. The legacy of resistance. Illyrians were known for independence and resilience. That spirit shows up again and again in Balkan history. In revolts, in cultural pride, in the stubborn determination to survive foreign domination. 3. Archaeology reveals their brilliance. Today, archaeologists uncover jewelry with intricate spiral motifs, advanced metalwork, fortified hill settlements, tombs filled with weapons and royal regalia, traces of complex social organization. Piece by piece, the Illyrians are returning to the story of Europe. 4. A lost civilization rising again. And maybe, that's the most amazing part. A people forgotten for centuries, buried under layers of Roman, Byzantine, Venetian, Ottoman, and modern history, are finally being recognized as one of Europe's foundational cultures. The Illyrians were not barbarians. They were builders, traders, warriors, and kings. A superpower long erased, now being rediscovered. If you made it this far, you're officially part of the Dude Historian community. Before you click away, tap like, comment where you're watching from, and subscribe so you never miss another forgotten chapter of world history. Because history isn't just what we remember, it's what we choose to uncover. And together, we just brought Europe's vanished superpower back into the light.